Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, a panel webinar with Dan Campbell, Jeff Bowling, Aaron Green, and Jeff Harris. I'm going to introduce all of them to you appropriately here in just a moment or two, but I do want to give people just a second to get into the session. And so while we're doing that, I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping and let everybody know here. So we are recording this, and assuming that they don't say anything that incriminates them, we will release this recording to the public. So you'll have the opportunity to grab that as well. The other thing to keep in mind is that we want this to be collaborative. So if you have questions, you could put them into the Q&A tab, you could put them into the chat. We're monitoring both of those and very happy to to address questions as they come up and as we go along here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and introduce our panelists. We'll get going. This was an Encore webinar. We had a number of people come up and say, oh man, we wish that we could have shared this with some of the rest of our leadership team back home. And so we said, hey, we can absolutely do that. And so we created this Encore. So thank you to each of the panelists for doing that. Thank you all to all of you for being here as well. It was an hour and 15 minutes at Staffing World Live, and I felt like we could have used 2 hours. We only have an hour today. So we're going to start with brevity, which is not any of the 5 of us's strength here. So we'll do our best. But I'm going to start by introducing Dan Campbell, who is upper left on my Hollywood Squares here on the panel webinar. He's a co-founder of Higher Dynamics, commercial staffing firm, primarily in the Southeast. He grew that business to more than $450 million in revenue, eventual sell to EmployBridge in 2021. He's a current investor, partner with them South, a private equity firm that has made investments in the space. He's a past chair of the American Staffing Association. That's actually where I met him and Aaron first, was through their affiliation with ASA. He's also a YPO past chairman, which brings me to Aaron Green, the founder and president of ProPivotal, award-winning Boston-based staffing firm. He's also an active investor in startups within and outside of the staffing industry, including PSG Global Solutions, a global talent solutions business based in the Philippines, recently sold to Teleperformance in a deal that was valued at $300 million. He's also a past chair of the American Staffing Association. You'll be hearing a lot of that as we go through here, because next I'm going to get to the Jeffs. I'll start with Jeff Bowling, founder and former CEO of the Delta Companies, a leading healthcare staffing firm that was acquired by Mitsui at over $100 million in revenue. After leaving Delta, he became the CEO of Curative, a member of the Doximity family of companies that went public. He was a part of the team that took that company public in mid-2021. He's an avid investor, fisherman, fly fisherman, none of this bait and tackle here. We're going to be using flies. He's a champion to our industry. He's a current ASA board member and an upcoming chair. Jeff, welcome as well. And then last, but certainly not least, Jeff Harris, co-founder of Attain Group, a leading IT staffing and services business. As the CEO, he led the company through 2 successful private equity transactions, eventually leading to a strategic acquisition by Manpower in 2021 for nearly $1 billion. He's a current ASA board member, actively coaches a number of executives in the industry. And with that, we've got all 4 of the group that is collectively 4 peers. Like I said, I've known Dan and Aaron from the very first conference that I ever went to when Clearly Rated started in this space. And then Jeff Bowling, his firm was the first firm to ever do NPS with us, which I think they got that idea from Aaron and that firm. And then Jeff Harris and I got acquainted through the rest of this group. And as 4 peers, they've invested in a number of staffing industry software companies. And actually, we're very happy that they invested in us first in Clearly Rated, the first investment that the group did. They also invest in staffing firms as well. So a wide breadth of background and knowledge here. With that as the backdrop, I want to kind of start, we're talking today about the journey from a founder mindset to a CEO mindset. And so I'm going to start actually, Harris, with you. Take just a minute or two and kind of share, we talked about your journey in your company in the introduction, but what was your journey kind of from that founder mindset to the CEO mindset? Just give us a couple of the key points on that, if you would.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And I'm setting a timer here, and I hope that everybody else does, because we are so passionate about this stuff that it can go late. And that took me 8 seconds to say that. So
You'll
hey,
do a good job,
everybody.
Rich.
I wish I could see your faces, but welcome to this, and excited to have this conversation. I would say the transition for me really was probably 6 or 7 years into the business. We had started it out of a room in a house and hired a lot of people that were friends and family, and really, I was just a guy working in the business. And I think that's sort of a lot of times what the founder mindset is. You're just kind of playing every role, right? And I knew that at some point, that transition was really knowing that, hey, if number one, do we want to get bigger? Do I want to be that guy? And once I kind of got past that decision, we really needed to get serious about a real plan, like something tangible that we thought we really could execute on. There's a lot that went into that, but that was really what took us, amongst a whole bunch of other things that kind of led out of that, to getting to the next step where I really started to feel like I was CEO. And part of that, I think the hardest thing for me was really having to let go, or even demote, per se, some of the people that really had gotten us to that point and were with us from day one. And so I would say those two things were the big barriers for me that sort of led through that transition period, amongst a lot of other things, but those are the ones that stand out the most.
Great, great. Dan, maybe does the same for your journey, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here, Eric. Appreciate everything you and clearly Rated does for the industry. I would say for me, maybe where my path is a little different from my friends here is that I actually started as a CEO and then became a founder and then CEO and then chairman. And so I learned a lot through a company, AHL Services, that grew real fast from 80 to 800 million in the time I was there. And they had a really good CEO, a guy who was the president of Coca-Cola. And I learned so much for how he did it, and everything from just, touching things only once. If somebody else has a copy of it, don't keep the copy. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. So many different things I learned from him, so that I thought that naively that age 28, 29, when I became CEO for the first time, I was ready to do it. And I was not a very successful CEO, certainly not in the first 6 months, for sure, if not the first year. And because you have to be authentic to who you are. And figured out that my previous company, it was successful in spite of its culture, not because of it. And I try to embrace that culture as a CEO, which wasn't authentic to me and just was not successful. So when John and I started Higher Dynamics in 2001, it was much more about, okay, knowing my first go with as a CEO was not successful. What am I going to do this time differently? And so, first of all, I think it has to do with surrounding yourself with a board of advisors. At least for me, I needed that counsel, and they coached me when it was time to be more of a CEO versus CFO. Read a lot of books, not as many as Bowling. He's the leader of the pack, I think, in this group in terms of the number of business books read. But this group helped a lot. And then it was, being much more too opportunistic versus intentional. So we would follow a customer to a new market. We would, open up a pharmacy division, finance and accounting, whatever it might be. And RPO, and woke up with the Great Recession saying, well, God, we're all over the country with 4 different divisions. I really got to be focused. So it was kind of a wake-up call to me that we had to be much more intentional and more systems process driven versus being opportunistic. So those were a couple points that really stuck out during my journey.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think that opportunistic piece is such a founder mindset, right? Is really kind of going where that next opportunity looks, and that can be really helpful in the early stages. It can also be really distracting as you're really trying to get to scale. Jeff, I mean, you've got some stories around that as well, but talk a little bit about your journey there.
Yeah, I think for me, I was much more of a salesperson early on as a leader, and I think you have to be to a large degree. But where I faulted was I wasn't much of a listener, and the humility of wanting other people's opinions both outside of the organization and more importantly, inside of the organization, that humility just comes with a little bit of maturity. So said another way, maybe emphasis on the word maybe, which is my favorite word, by the way. Maybe your goals and your strategies, your plans when you're in startup mode are accurate. Not to say they're right or wrong, because I don't know that there is a right or wrong, but maybe that plan, those strategies, they would have gotten you there. And as you get bigger, and when you're smaller in the wild west, you got to be that way, right? But as you get bigger, you've got to empower other people. You've got to listen to their approaches, their plans, their ideas, and build those together. And so I'd rather have a plan that wasn't necessarily my plan. That certainly I guess the core of it maybe is my plan, but let others influence that. So I got maybe 80% of what I wanted in any particular year or quarter. I'd rather have that plan that's 110% executed because people are bought in. The idea if they get a way in, they get bought in, than to have me be the dictator, dictate the plan to people. And because there's not a lot of ownership, there's not a lot of buy-in, it gets 70% executed. So I think, for me, it was about being less of a dictator, although again, maybe you needed to be that way in startup mode, and becoming more empowering, more humble, both inside and outside the organization. Maybe I could sum all that up by saying you have to be, for me, I think, I know this is true of me, and I think for everybody, you have to be willing to get things done a different way maybe than you would do them. Yeah. Right. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to get to.
Dan, I think you actually at one point had shared sort of a rubric that you use that if somebody else can do it 80% as well as you can, then you shouldn't do it.
Exactly right.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, it's you also that the sort of desire to use the word maybe, Jeff, makes me think of Jarrett Creason, who has run our engineering for years and years here, likes to say he wants people that have strong convictions loosely held. And I think that's a really nice way, right? To go in believing something strongly, but being open to the type of information that would change that. Aaron,
that all starts with a little bit of humility, right? You've got to be arrogant if you think you have the entire plan figured out for the duration of your career as a leader. Like, that's just arrogant and probably not going to work for you.
Hey, can I just add one more thing to that, though? But at the same time, as a founder, everybody says you can't be successful, so you have to have a little bit of that. I don't know. I don't think arrogance maybe is the right word, but a little bit of not necessarily following the herd and not always listening. But then as a CEO, boy, it's so much more important.
Yeah, there will always be more reasons not to start a company than there are to start a company, right? And the conventional wisdom will always tell you to go somewhere else. You're right. You have to be willing to buck that trend a little bit as well. So Aaron, talk a little bit. As we've kind of gone through this, the rest of the group felt like you were the first one to embrace the CEO mindset. You and I, when we were talking about, felt like maybe we've never embraced a CEO mindset. Take me a little bit to how kind of this conversation has made you think about your journey.
Well, I'll say two things first. One, I want to understand what Dan Campbell meant when he said, if someone else has a copy, don't take one. So I need to understand that further. And two, what I've learned is when Jeff Bowling says maybe, and then goes on to say something else, it's actually something really profound coming after the maybe. So listen up. There's something really important there, because it's usually a really well thought out maybe and insight into things. For me, I first started a company in 1996, and it was definitely the founder mindset, right? And I guess maybe to step back for a second, I think we're talking in this session about, are we a founder or are we a CEO? And I really think it's a continuum. It's not, this binary thing where all of a sudden like one thing happens and you become a CEO. I think you start to exhibit CEO attributes at certain times, and probably throughout the journey of growing a business, you need to exhibit different attributes at different times. Sometimes a CEO, sometimes a founder. For me, I first started the company Professional Staffing Group, or PSG, back in 1996. And the sure way, or the way I know for sure that I was acting as a founder, not a CEO, is all I cared about was top line. in a business that didn't need to only care about top line, right? So it was just like, how do we grow? How do we do this? How do we go from this level to that level? And and it started getting really fun talking about the growth that we were achieving, and up 50% this year, up 70% this year. But because we were growing without profits, we ran right in. 5 years later, we went from nothing to about 12 million in sales in 2000, only to hit the dot-com bust in 2001. Followed by 9/11 at the end of 2001, and the company with under my incredible leadership ended up flat on its back because we had no profits, we had no room for error, and we probably had do the math on this, guys, like probably 70 people doing 12 million in sales. So it wasn't unfortunately for me, I both had a founder mindset and a recruiter mindset. Right. So I just loved recruiting, and I just hired anyone I possibly could. I thought everyone was really good, but there was sort of no limit to the number of people that I would hire, other than the number of desks we had in the office. So after that growth streak, and then putting the company flat on its back, come in 2002, almost went out of business. We lost money, I think, for the first five out of the first 6 months of the year, and had some debt on the business at that point in time. And that's when I think I needed to become a lot more of a CEO and understand how to put profitability into a business while growing at the same time. So for me, it was running into a brick wall, I guess, full speed. That helped me understand that there was a different role that I needed to play, and not just be the growth guy, and also start going for profits. It happened to have led into what you described earlier, Eric, which is, as this group started becoming close, I had just emerged from that growth and learning experience, and really set the path of the company onto being quite profitable in the early 2000s. So, that said, if not for a couple of really lucky breaks in 2002, I never would have had a chance to put those lessons to work. Or if I did, it would have been under a different company name.
And Eric, I think Aaron's being pretty humble. I think I know he got to profitability and focus more than the three of us. He was the first one of this group that really pushed that for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. And, you talk about sort of, you're running into a brick wall, and it makes me think that sometimes humility is sort of gained slowly, and sometimes it's gifted to you all at once. And
I got it all at once.
Yeah, I certainly have had a couple times where I've gotten it all at once as well. So we've got some questions that actually already are coming into the Q&A tab. So everybody that's on the webinar, please keep putting those questions in there, and we'll get to them as we're kind of going through here. One of the questions that I want to, it's a variation of what's in the Q&A. But Jeff Bowling, I'll start with you. Talk a little bit about how that mindset, let's really understand what are some things, we've heard some things here, right? Opportunistic versus intentional, humble versus, confident, maybe to the extreme at times, right? Talk a little bit about some of the differences that you see in that difference in mindset from a founder mindset to a more of a CEO mindset.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, I think you have to be a salesperson, right? Because you got to go sell something before anything happens. You have to sell some people on coming to work for you. So without that salesmanship, you won't have a company. You can't be in startup mode at all. I think the founders are willing to experiment a little bit more. They're okay with failing, right? And the best ones fail fast with some experiments, and using the Jim Collins I guess model, but they shoot bullets before cannonballs, right? Try some small things, experiment small, and then go big. I think some of the other characteristics of founders is that they're empathetic with their internal staff, the people that they've hired, as they should be, right? Those people have been incredibly loyal and helped them get to where they've gotten. But of course, then you over-index there, and as Harris mentioned, right, you become loyal to a fault, loyal to the loyal. To a fault, and you hang on to people that can't help you move forward. And then so when you shift over into the CEO mindset, away from that salesmanship, that experimental, empathetic, maybe bordering on sympathetic, loyal to the loyal, and you go into the CEO mode, I think one of the things that helped me early on is I've always been pretty OCD. I like order, and so that helped with process and being able to scale. So I think CEOs have to have a little bit of that process and rhythm, and just that OCD sort of mindset, because you need a more predictable business and you need a more consistent business that people can really trust in. That's both all stakeholders, right? The internal folks and any investors you may have. And I think the biggest difference is where the founder is loyal to those loyal people to a fault, and they hang on to people that where the business has just outgrown them for too long. Perhaps the CEO could also over-index here. And I love Aaron's comment about this is a continuum. It's not binary, but you could have a CEO who gets way too loyal to the mission and forgets about the people. And those two things aren't mutually exclusive, right? You can do both. You can care about people, and you can go run and operate a really profitable and growing business. To think that those two things are mutually exclusive is really small-minded. It's a little bit more work to balance both of those, but certainly doable.
I think it's also how you problem solve, right? You know, in a CEO in a founder mindset, you're like, okay, this problem exists, let me go fix it, right? A CEO mindset, you're like, okay, this problem exists, you know, how can we fix it, and how can we put a process in place so that it doesn't, you know, rear its head again shortly.
And Harris could probably weigh in on this, right? Because he was great about that, right? He was never too arrogant to say, I don't know. I don't know how to fix this problem. You know, what would you do? What would you do? Let's get together in a room and figure this out together, as opposed to where early on we all think we have to have the answer.
Yeah.
Harris, can you mention? I mean, you talk a lot about that.
Yeah, I think, you know, I love always telling that story. I mean, I think as a founder, you can get really proud of what you're doing and get away from the fact that you still need to learn things. You get, you know, a lot of times when you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, people are always giving you accolades and all those stuff. So you can get a little arrogant with that stuff too. But, you know, I think the mentality you have to have, it's okay not to know, you know, and you got to be able to admit that. But what I would say is, you know, for me, it was never okay for me not to be learning. You know, that was the non-negotiable type of thing. Always be learning. And that's certainly what I got from this group for sure. You know, and also to answer the question directly that you asked, Eric, I think, you know, I think of the number one, being a founder is a great thing. I think we need to make sure we say that again, because it's not like if you don't get to be what we're describing as a CEO that you're doing something wrong. And there's nothing wrong with being ultra loyal to your people, because when you're in that founder mentality, you have to be loyal, because you want to surround yourself with people that you think are going to do the right thing for the company. You know, there's a lot of that. But as you get into a bigger organization and you move from being that lieutenant mentality, I'm in the weeds with you guys, versus I'm now becoming the general. I got to work, you know, work through other people. That trust kind of changes. It goes from I need to trust the people that I put up here, that they're going to get the best job done. They're not just the most, you know, trusted advisors to me necessarily to do the right thing for the business. You know, it's a tough distinction to make, but that's I agree with everything everybody else has said. So I'm just trying to add something else there.
Yeah. Dan or Aaron, anything else that you would add, and then we'll move on to kind of the next piece here.
Go ahead, Aaron. You have anything? No, I think I just think Harris's distinction is a good one. One's not right or wrong. They're just a different mindset and different skills that kind of come to the table that you got to develop.
When I said this when we were live at Staffing World 2, is, you know, you can choose that ultimately that transition is not for you, right? And so I really love being a founder. I really love being in a specific set of problems. And so we brought in an outside CEO. And in large part, we brought in an outside CEO because I didn't want to make the transition that really the business needed to make in that mode. I wanted to geek out on doing stuff like this. And so you can make that choice as well.
Can I add one more? Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I was going to say is, and I know it's been alluded to, that sort of thing about a founder is more of getting results themselves or being involved in all big decisions, versus CEO is more getting the majority of results through people. but you can also do that wrong. I can tell you one of my early mistakes, I didn't mention this the last time we all got together, was this whole concept of debating and then deciding on important issues. But as a founder, if I'm looking in the mirror and being honest, a lot of times I would have already decided and then debated, which is better. I mean, that's worse than not doing it at all, because nothing's going to frustrate more your folks that if you're debating, but they know you've already made your decision, you're not open to. So I learned that the hard way and really had to adjust to that.
Yeah,
That's a really good point that we didn't bring up before today. I mean, like when you really do believe when you're managing through a team, what you think is the right thing for the organization, and having to collaborate and hopefully get your team to arrive at that decision is an art of a CEO. You know, that a founder often doesn't have to be as good at that yet. You know?
Yeah. And Dan, you're right, because the truth leaks, right? You went into that room, and my question back to you would be, so, you know, early on when you were founder, you had your mind made up. You went through the motions of asking their opinions, although you knew what you were going to do. How did that change? What did you do, you know, when you became more mature, I guess, or became a little bit more evolved into that CEO role?
That's a great question. I think I would go into the discussion with, I'm pretty convinced. I feel strongly that this is what we should do, but I'm open to, you know, having my, you know, thought swayed. I just want to let you know I'm coming into this discussion. I mean, the smooth CEO, as Harris talked about, has that Socratic method that they can just do that. But again, you got to be authentic, and as long as there's a high level of trust and you're building trust, which a lot of times is being vulnerable, and sometimes that vulnerability can be, hey, I have a pretty strong conviction, but I'm not 100%, but let's have that discussion. But that was few and far between. Usually it was more of just making sure if we're going to have a big group debate discussion, it's something that, you know, myself or John, we weren't pretty convinced that's what we wanted to do, or what probably wasn't even worth the debate, to say, hey guys, you know, this is what I think we need to do, is more the founder versus CEO.
What made you change? Like where were you in your you know, career where you were like, all right, like, you know, this isn't right. I can't keep going in the room with my mind made up. I need to evolve. Like, what was it?
What I found is that after 2 or 3 straight times of deciding and then debating, I was getting no feedback. And so people were shutting down. Like, why are we even having the discussion? You've already just kind of decided what you're going to do. And it's like, if you're going to hire really talented people, and I think Bowling, you said it earlier, the more they feel like they're bought in and they have part of the decision, the more everybody's going to, you know, be rowing in the same direction. And so, I mean, that's really what it was.
I think that's why it's also.
I think I'm going to overtalk this time because I've been cut off like 3 times. I think that shift goes from where you're opportunistic and you think you've got most of the answers, if not all of them, to a sense of responsibility. Like we have to be the best versions of ourselves, and we have to come up with the best answers for the organization. And when that responsibility sort of weighs on you a little bit more, you become really curious about what the right possibility is, right? What the right answer might be to whatever challenge you're facing that time. So for me, it's about a growing sense of responsibility to do right for the company. And when I say company, I mean company of people. Like when company would come to your house, that sort of context.
Yeah. I think that's also kind of weighs in the fact that, you know, as you get bigger and you are managing through people, the importance of having really good data, really having some knowledge and learning, which I got a lot from you guys, of what's happening in the industry, not just within our walls, and being able to come into a conversation, maybe saying, I don't know, but here's the trends that I am seeing. I mean, these are non-negotiable. We're heading in this direction, because it's really easy when your team's getting bigger to have a lot of opinions and operate as when you should no longer be operating on gut. When you really have to be relying on real information and what's happening. So I think it's helpful to get your team informed with that baseline as you to what sort of informing decisioning process. But it's okay to go in and say, I don't have the answers here.
The last thing I'll add, Aaron, to your question is, I think we haven't talked about, one of the biggest things transitioning from a founder to a CEO is discipline. Founders aren't always known for their discipline. So when you're in a conversation with your team is being disciplined enough to not weigh in until everybody else has weighed in, versus maybe somebody in your team says something you disagree with. You don't jump right in and tell them why you feel different, that sort of thing. Is being disciplined for everybody to weigh in. Plus, you're more likely to sway what other people's opinions are if you weigh in on your opinion too early. So that's
Right.
probably another way I evolved over the years.
So I
One of
wanted,
the-
oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I was gonna say two things. One, and I'll just kind of go backwards through them. I think, Dan, to your comment about, does a CEO's discipline, a founder maybe not as much. I think it's a different type of discipline,
Okay.
right? Like the founder is disciplined in that they're not giving up on the fact that they're going to, you're applying your discipline to being successful, to getting over that threshold and surviving, right? I mean, you just kind of got to get up every single day and keep doing the same thing, even though the world keeps telling you, we don't need you. And then it's applying that discipline across other, in other areas that then help that company build and be successful. So I think oftentimes
Right.
the founder has the discipline. It's just they're applying it differently. Um, what I found interesting, and sorry, I'm probably acting a little more facilitative, but Harris just talked about going to events and kind of bringing back real world information and challenging the team to say, hey, this is what the industry is doing. Like, like how do we apply that here, or how do we be better than what the industry is doing, right? Just help sort of like refine the opinions around the table. And I think in one of our prep sessions, Jeff Bowling, you had said, like, it was my job actually to go to these events and like keep all, like, as the representative of Delta, but keep, protect my people from it. I wanted to keep all the noise out from all the external noise out so I could focus people. So I'm curious what your comment would be, sort of, Jeff was, let's say, like, versus what Harris was saying.
Yeah, I think my comments back when we were in Nashville was probably more around the predictions about what the industry would do. Like if somebody was said, hey, Allied's going to grow by 7% this year. I thought that was nonsense, right? I mean, if you're hiring, if your horsepower from a hiring perspective is up 50% and you only do 7% more because that's what the industry experts, whoever they are, that's what they say. That's nonsense, right? So I always try to protect them from just sort of, I don't know, performing down to that level when I knew we were capable of so much. Said another way, like, I think you have a responsibility as a leader to look at what's possible and lead people in that direction versus what the industry experts say is probable.
Yeah, I think that, and Dan, you had a really good point when we were all together about one of the founder things, right? You get filled up with these ideas, and founders start things, right? And so you come back and you'd be like, we need to start this and start this and start this. And, and it just kind of blow up your leadership team. So I do
Use
think
the hell out of them.
yeah, right. There's a real balance on that piece of it. But I want to actually go and move the conversation to the next level, which is, and Jeff Harris, you kind of started me thinking this way, which, not everybody on the call is in the C-suite. A lot of people are reporting into the C-suite that are on this call. And actually a lot of people in the C-suite, one of the key things to making that transition from founder to CEO is really being able to get the most out of the people that are reporting into you. And so I want to kind of shift to some of the advice that we would give to people that are reporting into the C-suite, or to our C-suite people on the call, things that they can, really try to coach and pull out of their direct reports. And one of those things, I think, to me, is really teaching them how to make the business case for things, right? So that when they're coming, they're using the data, they're making a business case if they believe strongly in something, and using their influence that way, as opposed to coming in with sort of an opinion-based piece, which then you have, two opinions going head to head, right? So really bringing things in, making the business case, using the data, understanding the data, is, I think, a best practice. What are some other ones? And Dan, I'm going to start with you. What are some other things that, if you're reporting into the C-suite, really make that person incredibly valuable to you?
Let me give this more thought. Harris, you want to lead this one?
Yeah,
I can.
it's a phenomenal question. I mean, I think I think a lot of this stuff starts with really being phenomenal at strategic planning, first of all, and making sure that the team is all on the same page, that their goals are really, really clear. And that everybody kind of knows their lane and their purpose and their role in achieving those things. Because, you know, bowling likes to talk about this all the time, and I agree. It's so easy to go start chasing stuff all over the place and get out of your lanes and do stuff that's not necessary. And I think when you do that and you allow your team to be involved in putting that together, that there's just, it's always a good, valuable conversation, and decisions get made. The business cases are made by being informed with what you're trying to accomplish as an organization, right? So this is kind of a big circle way to answer this question, but I think, you know, what I always appreciated so much about my executive team is, well, first of all, I gave them permission to criticize me, you know, and give me input. And I made that clear that I want to hear that, you know. And I always really appreciated the ones that would bring, that would personally help me develop as an executive, and how I was being perceived and how I said things and how things came across. I loved that. And then, you know, the folks that we could talk about a problem and they could come back with a solution on how they're going to help with that, versus asking, you know, what do you want me to do? So I think, you know, that's huge. But at the same time, I think I really learned how to make sure those people were around me that really supported the culture and the vision of the business and the plan, and were problem solvers and that kind of thing. Because I think if you're just always coming with a canned answer that sounds fancy and, you know, you know what you think they're going to hear, you're not helping as much, you know. So
Yeah.
you know.
I want to go to Aaron next. Jeff and Dan, I do want to bring you guys in on this, but Aaron, I feel like when we've talked about this, you've given this some very real thought. Like what is kind of your take on this?
Well, you know, I'm reflecting a bit on what Dan said earlier about going into a meeting and already having the answer made up, and you know, and what would have been super valuable to him in that moment. That's not, my whole answer isn't formed around that, but I was just saying, like, to me, I think if you're reporting to someone in it was in a C whatever role, I think establish what's valuable to that person is feedback. Because they don't get it a lot. I mean, Jeff just mentioned, you know, I gave people permission to criticize me. Dan mentioned, you know, when I came in the room and already had the idea figured out, and it took people, you know, 3 meetings and they just shut down, right? Like what would have been super valuable to Dan is if someone pulled him aside or in the meeting, right, had the guts to say, hey, like, I feel like you came in here with your mind made up already. Do you even want us to have this conversation? Right? You'd probably say a little less, um, you know, argumentative than maybe I just did, right? But
No, they've done that to me before.
but you know, but I just think that there's such a scarcity of feedback, of holding a mirror up to people at the CEO level, or even, you know, insert founder too. I just think that, like, you know, being someone who's that truth teller to the CEO makes you invaluable, because almost everybody is trying to tell that person what they think that person wants to hear. And in reality, that person wants to hear, like, everything that's wrong with what they're doing so that they can fix it. Right. And there's obviously different people with different levels of thick skin. You know, and if you happen to be working for a thin skin CEO, you probably should find a different one, would be, you know, my advice. But because it's hard, it's tough to be in that level of responsibility and not be able to speak to speak your mind. But that's, to me, I think that's super valuable. And you know, and even establishing a two-way feedback session to be like real practical, you know, in your one-on-one, or whether it's weekly or monthly or periodically, just spending the first 5 to 10 minutes in a one-on-one session with two-way feedback. What's going well on my side? You know, here's what I think's going well. Here's what I think's not going well. Here's what, you know, I think, you know, and then have the other person go back and forth. Like, establishing that regular cadence, I think, helps making telling the truth a lot easier when there's an initial forum for it.
Yeah, I tell a story around this real quickly. Sorry, Dan. Yeah, so along these lines, when I was at Delta, my executive coach from time to time would come into some of our meetings. And I was so proud of the fact that he said in the end that we argued like brothers and sisters. But then once we came up and made a decision, we were unified on the floor, right, with the rest of the organization. When I went to Curative, I have a new appreciation for the quote or cliche that my reputation precedes me, because people thought that I was just going to have all the answers and knew all the, which is crazy. I couldn't get anybody to argue with me. I literally, would go in and ask for opinions and crickets. So I literally took two different executives from the team and said, "Hey, this next meeting, I want you to argue with me. Like, I want you to be nonsensical as you stand up to me." And we sort of role played that a little bit. We go into the meetings and they argue and kick back. My response is, "Wow, that's a great point, Michael. Or, that's a great point, Arthur." And it opened the door, opened the floodgate to other people going, "Oh, I see that it's okay to disagree with him," and it was very effective.
That's a great story. I'll add one more thing. I don't know if I've even shared it with this group before, but one of our breakthroughs as the executive team and making decision was really making sure you had a diverse group in terms of mindset. And I've always been a believer, think of it like a triangle. You got 3 points, you got those that are revenue driven, sales driven, driving it. You have others that have the priority on gross margin or gross margin percentage, kind of what's the value you're offering the client and are you pricing it correctly? And the third is more the expense management or efficiency or metric driven. And so we went around as a management team and said, just from your own vantage point and your own just comfort level, how would you rank these 1, 2, 3? And we wanted to make sure within our executive team, weren't all the same. And we had some that were revenue sales was number one, others gross margin, others expense management, because when you can get a blend of those three, you're more likely to not only speak up and debate and have but people are coming from it from a different lens, which allows you to think more holistically about, best way to solve the problem.
I mean, we're recording this, right, and having this conversation on election day, and the echo chambers, right, is a very real concern in your business, just like it is in the United States, in the society, right? And if you surround yourself with people that are thinking the same way, have a similar set of experiences, similar set of background, view the most important things identically, you're going to really miss out on that breadth of experience and opportunity.
That's why Lincoln's book, as Dan mentioned, I'm a reader, right? It's called Team of Rivals. Like, his cabinet was made up of his rivals because he thought that was going to give him the best, different points of view and different perspectives. It was brilliant. Why he was the greatest leader we've ever had.
Yeah. Well, I want to shift here to some questions actually from the audience. We've got some really good ones in here. And I'm going to start with this first one. And Jeff, you kind of described yourself as a little bit OCD. So I'm going to start with you on this. Describe the systems that you use to run larger companies, i.e. dashboards, meeting cadence, annual strategic planning. What were some of the key kind of disciplines that you had in the systems you had in place?
Yeah, of course, we had dashboards with KPIs, different KPIs for different levels, different people in the organization, right? So leaders had, the frontline reps had KPIs, their leaders would have different KPIs, their leaders would have different KPIs. So that was certainly a big part of what we did. Although I never really got hung up on this week, is because I always thought my job was what's going to happen this time next year. Yeah, those, and I think the thing I probably over-indexed on was just the meeting cadence and rhythm. And so we had what we called the chart of meetings, and it listed every meeting that happened in the organization, who facilitated it, how long was it, what was the objective, who attended. And it certainly, I think it helped, probably drove some people that were less organized crazy. But I think having the objective of the meeting there listed was very helpful. And then roles and responsibilities, right? An org chart that includes some level of roles and responsibilities, because when you're growing, it's super easy to have what I call role creep, where you have different people doing different jobs. And everybody's sort of not sure, and then accountability is lacking, and it becomes a mess. So those are a couple that come to mind up front.
Dan, anything that you would add to that? Maybe Aaron?
Ahead, Aaron. I thought bowling said
I
it
was
well.
gonna say, I think that last point you made, it was something that I just learned maybe in the last year or so org chart says who reports to whom. Right, but it doesn't necessarily at each box in that org chart, what's that box responsible for? What are the 3 to 5 bullet points that of what that either that person or that role owns, and what are the outcomes from that role that you expect? And I think that's just having that level of clarity is really, really important.
Even with the support folks that aren't necessarily producing,
Mm-hmm.
they need to have
Everybody,
they need to have some metrics that they're held accountable to.
And usually, yeah, people evolve and the role creep to what they're passionate about, which is really not always where you hired them for. So it's, and sometimes that gets lost in a long job description. And so I think to what these guys were mentioning, the more you can simplify it and what are the top 3 things you want to accomplish in this role in the next 12 months, not just the organization, and how does that apply to what the overarching goals are for the overall organization, is such a more simplified way. Because I think too often, I know I've been at least guilty of it, is when you hire somebody, not being very clear on what you're hiring for and what you want that person to accomplish, and constantly review that, because it will creep.
I think you're really smart to, everybody has this comfort level, right? This part of their job that they know that they're good at, that they, get value in. And, obviously maximizing people's ability to be in that space is a really good thing as well. But understanding what that space is about yourself and about others kind of helps you combat against that, right? Because I know for myself, like, when maybe I should be setting up 5 conversations with staffing leaders, my natural tendency is like, oh, I could do that, but boy, it'd be really cool to just dive in and see if there's any differences in the employment data, right? That's my happy place. And there's a time when that's good, but there's also a time when that's actually a detriment to what the business needs. And I think for yourselves and for your teams, understanding where they're naturally wanting to go. Oh, this is a person that loves process. Like they're going to build process when they should be doing something else. Like making sure that those KPIs take that into account, I think is useful.
Well, and to that point, don't forget about yourself, right? I mean, if you're the founder or CEO of the company, and don't just put together everybody else's responsibilities, put together your own, right? Because otherwise your own can just be everything else and stepping on toe, and like kind of getting involved in things that you shouldn't be, and sort of knowing when you're outside your own role and when you're inside is as important for a CEO as for anyone.
Yeah.
Well, and especially to Aaron's point, when you're a founder, because who does a founder report to? When you're a CEO, you have a board or executive chairman. If you don't, like, figure out where is that accountability going to be? Is it really going to be with your whole team? Is there an individual? If you don't have a board, where's your accountability? Which not all founders are comfortable with, but it's a healthy exercise.
I think that this is a really good question from one of the attendees. And
are you going to answer some of the not so good questions? I want to hear what some of those are.
Yeah, I'm just answering those privately.
All right, okay.
So this question is, what do you do when your back is against the wall financially and you're trying to keep your team motivated? And I'll give that person a ton of credit for asking that question because I guarantee they're not the only one that is feeling this way after the last 24 months in our industry. So what are some thoughts on that you all have? Harris, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah. I think it depends on what's causing that. If it's an industry thing where it's a recession and stuff, I always tried to use that as a motivating factor that, hey, we're going to get through this, and we're going to try to hold on to people. And when we come out the other end, we're going to be ready to take advantage of this. If it's different where things are just going bad and your back's up against the wall and you're having financial issues, I don't know if this is going to answer the question well, but I never felt like that was just my problem. It was something that when we were in those situations, and we had it more than once, particularly being owned by a private equity firm and having 2 different ones with different personalities, we would bring that problem to the team and think about how are we going to resolve this. Those are times also to rethink what you're spending money on and what's the priority and what do we really need. And because you do get to the point in good times where you kind of can overspend a little bit with things that you didn't necessarily need. So, that's how we would do it. I mean, the simple very tactical way to do it is obviously you have to cut costs through the organizations, but hopefully you have a team that can really help make those recommendations and take ownership of that. So you're not, feeling like you're a dictator just pushing that down.
The biggest mistake I made as a leader was not being fully transparent about this very thing, and because not because I didn't wasn't not because I was afraid of being transparent, but because I just didn't want to bother people with it. I thought it was a nuisance, and we would make it through, and we were having cash flow. This is towards the end of 2009. And what I did was erode trust, and it set us back for a year, maybe 2 years in the way of culture, but because of it, because the truth leaks and people know. And if you ask them, again, kind of going back to what we started off with, if you ask them to help you solve the problem, they're going to be 110% behind this. And you just you think you're doing the right thing by protecting them from it, but in fact that's the wrong answer. You've absolutely got to include them. And then I'll also say that you shouldn't confuse your conviction for getting through it with the vulnerability of being transparent. You can be both of those things, right? You can be completely confident and convicted that you're going to make it through, and transparent about what's going on. Those things, you can be both of those things.
Yeah, I think it's great advice.
Well, can I add some? Oh, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, I think bowling's advice. I think that you're trying to sugarcoat it. Your people know. They either leak or they already know. I think that's the best advice answer you can give. So I think bowling said it well. I can say our experience during the Great Recession was we had to make tough decisions as a result. I mean, we had some loyalty programs that made no sense in compared to having to let people go. So we were very transparent and said, hey, the executive team is going to take a 20% salary cut. We're going to ask the management team to take a 10% cut, and all their employees are taking 7%. So we're taking a higher percentage cut. We don't know how long it's going to last. We'd like to start this for a period of time, but sometimes when you say it's only going to last a certain point of time and things outside your control, it lasts longer, then you do additionally risk eroding that. And then the other thing to say during tough economic times, kind of like the industry's had the last 2 years, is this is the opportunity that if you can get through it, you have a better opportunity to leapfrog competitors. Whereas when things are going well, all boats are rising. You can't really change your position in the marketplace that easy as you can during tough times. So which will lead to more opportunities for, all the folks hopefully in your organization.
I always felt less stressed actually in bad times, because I always got more stressed when things were good and we were missing out on opportunity and stuff, but one thing I was going to say on the flip side of this subject is, we made it really important. I know you guys did too, because we always talked about this, that profitability matters, and it's okay to share that with everybody in the organization, and I didn't do that for a long time. It was like, hey, I don't want to tell everybody how much money we're making, all that stuff. But when you can tie that to your purpose, the vision of the business, what you can do when you're profitable, and how that creates opportunity for people, it makes the conversation a lot easier when you actually have to go the other way and actually remove expense if you have to do that, or people kind of start to understand and respect those decisions.
One of the things that we did during the early stages of COVID, when it was really topsy-turvy in the industry, was we rolled out these micro target goals. And so instead of having a quarter goal or even a monthly goal, it was like, okay, this is what we need to do this week. And we just rallied around that. And then if we were able to, have 5 things on that, if we got to 3 of the 5, we just celebrated the hell out of it. And we kind of tried to take that forward with us, because it was a much more effective way, because it is hard. There's a lot of things that are happening that aren't going the way that you want it to. And so really shining the light on the things that are, can help to get people through that tough time as well.
That's great advice, right? Celebrate the small wins. Celebrate. Don't forget to celebrate along the way. Yeah, that's great advice.
The stuff that's eventually going to lead, Jeff, your baseball coaching days, right? The stuff that maybe doesn't put points on the scoreboard right now, but if you keep doing it, eventually it will. Those are the types of things that are in control, and you can really celebrate those.
We do runs, not points, but yes.
I stopped watching baseball when I was a little leaguer, and so my data is a little bit out of whack there.
So a pick 6.
Exactly.
Yeah.
back when you get to halftime in the baseball game. So we've got about 5 minutes. I'm not going to get to everybody's question in here, but let's go a quick answer on this, Jeff. I think you have the best answer on this, so I'm going to go to you, Bowling. How did you form the group, and how can somebody find a group like this?
Oof. Yeah, I was fortunate. Dan was the catalyst for our group. For the four of us, we got together every 6 months, spent a day and a half together, shared best practices. We opened up our kimonos. We're very transparent with one another. And I, give these guys all the credit for any success I've been given to this point. How to do that? You gotta go and pull on some coattails, right? And say, hey, tell me a little bit about you. Find people that are, you don't have to be like-minded, but I think the goals have to be sort of like-minded. And that's going to take some trial and error. The thing about our group that not a lot of people know is we weren't the only four. There were others that came and went. We were the four that stuck with it over the 10 or 12 years that we met. And so, yeah, the other thing is the ASA has a CEO group. They'll if you apply to that, they'll try to put you together with people that aren't going to be a conflict of interest, different segments, different geographies, whatever, but that would be sort of similar in experience level. So that's another thing that maybe you try is that ASA CEO group.
Tom Kosnick also has a group. I know Dan, you and John had been parts of some of his groups over the years. So that's another opportunity on that as well.
A lot of groups out there.
Yeah,
I think there's over 24 groups. I would answer it, Eric, as just get involved. Just go to conferences, whether it's ASA, SIA, because if you're not out there, you're not going to find the people to figure out who you want to. And then ask people, like, who are you most impressed with in your industry or other things, and then find ways to connect with those people.
Yeah, I think our group really worked, and I think we were part of a larger group and felt as a subset that there were things we wanted to do that we weren't getting out of that larger group. So we sort of created one with our own rules. But I think, you probably can accomplish almost as much if you get the right executive coach as well. I mean, and those are probably maybe a bit easier to find. I think we got, I think we all put ourselves out there, but perhaps also got a little bit lucky in what we were able to create. I wouldn't put this as the standard of any group I was a part of, but there's also some ready-made groups in each geography, right? I think, Dan has joined and was a big proponent of YPO, right? And probably found similar types got similar types of feedback from YPO or the smaller group EO, where you're probably going to be more careful that you want to make sure you're in with a group of people who already have achieved a certain level of success. I think Vistage maybe, is another one that I think Bowling, you were involved in Vistage, if I'm not mistaken. So, I think that there are if you can't just sort of like wave a magic wand and put yourself in a room with 4 or 5 or 6 other staffing CEOs, you can certainly, there's other avenues that get you, I think, a lot of the way to what we got.
And I think it's important also to try to align yourself with folks who have relatively similar goals, and they really do want to grow. So let's be honest, you got a lot of people say it and they're not really willing to do it, so they're not adding value to that circle, and so that's tough. The one thing, and if you guys said it, I missed it, but we came from different segments of the staffing business also, which was really, really cool. Sometimes some things didn't apply, but then there was things that we got to take away that were very interesting that were happening in the other segments that we could apply that maybe weren't happening in ours. And the flip side of that is, I also participated in a group with other IT staffing executives, and that was equally as beneficial. And there's no reason you can't network with competitors, and I shied away from that for a long time. And then I realized the value of it. We're all, especially at our sizes, we're all trying to take market share away from the big guys. We can help each other. And so I would definitely encourage you to try to do both if you can.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that you have to be willing to share. Like nobody's going to open up and share their best practices with you, and then you're going to sit on everything that's working or not be vulnerable, right? And not be willing to say that some things aren't working, right? So you have to go in you're going to get what you give. And part of what makes this group work that I've seen on this is that you'll go in and be like, oh man, we are getting crushed right now on this. Or, this part, man, I can't figure this out. Like we keep trying these different things. It's not really working. And on the same side, you're willing to share something, even if it's, quote unquote, special sauce for the company. Well, I do have a commitment to getting us out on time. And I really just want to thank each of you in this public forum for taking the time here, but also just for what you've done for our industry, what you've done for me personally, professionally, and Clearly Rated, and just the commitment that you all have to really making your peers in the industry and giving them the tools that they need to continue to level up their organizations. Really appreciate that. Also, everybody for attending, thank you so much. We appreciate it. If we didn't get to your question, reach out, shoot to us via LinkedIn or something along those lines. This group's very good about responding to those types of things. So thank you so much. We will share the recording, and you can have this if you want to share it with other people as well. With that, have a wonderful rest of the day. Go vote if you haven't voted. And hopefully we'll have some analysis on who's going to be the new president here in the next couple.
Who did you vote for, Eric?
Yeah, it's I can't even. Oh, we're out of time. We're out of time, Jeff. Sorry, we're just out of time.
Eric lives in Oregon. It doesn't matter who he voted for.
That's right, exactly. I'm not one of the 7 states that matters. We should be asking Campbell. That's the only one that matters.
Right.
Oh no, Harris too.
Harris too. North Carolina and Georgia.
Yep.
Yeah. For the other three of us, doesn't matter. Well, thanks. It was good to see you guys. It was a fun conversation. Eric, thanks for organizing this.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, everyone.
All right, take care. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.